Rev up your engines!
Now, with the price of new and used cars going sky high, a lot of people are asking me, Scotty, when do you think it's going to come down and we can buy them? Well, there may be bad news for the future, because even though the U.S. Federal Reserve says that the spike in inflation that we're having now is transitory, and, it's not going to last, right? Everybody knows inflation is taking over in this country. A fool can see that. House prices, car prices, grocery store prices. Intelligent economists out there that are warning that inflation could repeat from the 1960s, where it started to go wild. In July, consumer prices went up 5.4% compared to the previous year. All right, that's a lot. But that's just the tip of the iceberg. If you remember anything about history, in the late 1960s, Mr. Martin, who was the Fed chair, admitted they lost control of inflation expectations. Yeah, we lost control of the transition. Yeah. To give you a real example, S&P said over 20 major United States cities last year, the price of houses went up 19.2%. That's big inflation. And of course, the pundits are supposed to know everything. They're trying to play it all down. One guy, the former Treasury Secretary Larry Sumner, said, double house price inflation hasn't yet shown up in the index. Yeah, well, it probably will soon. So when people are asking me, hey, Scotty, when should I buy a car and the price is going to come down? They might not be coming down for quite some time. If we really get into an inflationary economy like in the 1960s, if you ask me, it'll be worse. Now, back then, everything wasn't completely computerized. Now, they can change prices on a computer in a microsecond, right? So they can raise things as fast as they want. It gets into a spiral where, just like, I'll give you a perfect example. The car dealers. They're now marking their cars up ton because they don't have enough to sell, and they think we have to make money somehow. We're not selling 5,000 cars. We're only selling 3. We got to make a bigger profit, so we'll mark them all up and sell them at higher prices. And that's what's creating this stuff. People getting houses, buying them, and thinking they can double what they paid for the house in 4 or 5 years, which was unheard of in the past. You realize you get a government system that starts throwing money at people. Here, take this money for nothing. Print up more money. We'll just give everything out. You don't have to pay your rent. Don't worry about it. It is going to create a massive inflation. You can see it's coming already. So it might be a long time before prices actually come down. They may be going up for quite some time. If you've been in high inflation, if you remember from the 60s or even the 70s, it took a long time for them to come back down again, but they can go up relatively quickly. Take care of the stuff you have now. And don't go out and overpay for stuff, but realize it's probably going to be a long time before prices actually do come down. Once that inflationary stuff starts up and giving up money for nothing, handing stuff out, printing more money, eventually it comes back to haunt the politicians who did this stuff as a short-term fix. Long-term, it's not viable. Prices may be going up for quite some time. Everybody just passes it on, like the manufacturers say, well, we had to pay more for the chips and stuff, so now we're charging more for the cars, and it just keeps rolling and rolling and rolling and rolling. That's the problem with inflation. And it basically shows that these economists don't really know much about anything, and they can't control anything either. They're kind of like riding a wave like a surfer, and they think, oh, wow, great, it's going good now. And then when the wave comes crashing down, they all get together. Oh, gee, I wonder what happened. We don't understand this now. Zamora 189 says, AC is not working like it should. My dad is an '02 Chevy Avalanche, 190,000 miles. AC didn't work, so he refilled it up and put a can of sealer, too. It was ice cold for a while. Now it's cold, but not really cold. When it idles, it's not quite as cold. You probably got a leak somewhere. You made a big mistake there. You put in sealer in a 20-year-old vehicle. A lot of times that will start to ruin the system. It clogs it up, clogs up the expansion valve, one that has an expansion valve like the Japanese, and that thing doesn't have an expansion valve. It's got orifice tube, but it clogs up the orifice tubes. They have little screens that'll clog them up. That was a mistake. Should have never done that. But as it stands now, I would say I'd evacuate the whole system out. I'd put in a load of refrigerant, fill it up to the full. If it blows cold then, see how long it lasts. And then if it stops after months, just keep adding a little bit. You can get those little add cans, add a little bit till it's cold, and just keep adding them. If it's enough that it doesn't leak out in a month or a few days or a week, just keep adding the stuff, because the only other thing you could do is put leak detector and find where the leaks are. And the car that old is probably going to need a compressor, probably going to need hoses. They'll be leaking too. They get that old. You can't expect 20-year-old AC on an American vehicle. Probably going to need a ton of work, but you could just keep adding refrigerant. Shouldn't have added that sealer, though. That could really clog things up. Zamora 189 says, what are the brown-black specks in my cooling system? My brother has a Lexus that's 17 years old. I don't think he ever changed the coolant. It's slightly pink. I took a sample. There were brown and black specks in it. What do you think they they are. Gasket parts, what? Probably the brown ones are kind of gasketed, but the black ones are the hoses. Your hoses are black rubber. They deteriorate on the inside before they deteriorate on the outside. If you ever want to check your hoses in an old car like that, don't just look at them, oh, they're not cracked on the outside. Take one of them off, the big one, like on the top. Look inside with a flashlight. If it's all cracking, you got to replace it now, because as they crack, the rubber specks will get in and clog everything up. Everything deteriorates when they get to be that old. Brown, that's more or less, you got brown specks. It's got to be gasket material starting to break down a little bit. If I were you, it's Lexus, it's good. I'd flush it out, put new coolant, and then see what happens. As long as it doesn't overheat, keep going. But I would inspect the hoses. If they're cracking, I would start replacing them all. Good Scotty says, will it be a fair price to install a new alternator and serpentine belt on an 09 Honda Civic? Father's an 09 Honda and it went bad last week. I take long trips and I'm worried. It's not that big of a deal. I mean, labor-wise, maybe $80. It's simple to take this stuff out and put it on. But here's the thing. Yours is working fine. You think, well, I'm worried I'm going to change it. Honda makes pretty good alternators. If I were you, I'd leave that alternator alone. I'd change the belt. For one reason. That alternator was a brand new alternator built by Honda. Right? You change out one that works good. You go to an auto parts store. You're going to get a rebuilt one. It's not a brand new one. I have seen some of those Hondas go 30 years on the original alternator. I see a lot of these rebuilts. They don't work out the box. They break in 6 months, last a year or two, then they break down. You'll probably get more lifespan out of that original Honda alternator than you'll ever get on some rebuilt thing that you get in an auto parts store. So I would leave it alone. I would not change it out at all. Now, let's say, oh, you're really worried and you take a lot of long road trips. You know what I'd say? Bite the bullet, buy one of those rebuilt alternators and leave it in your trunk. And if it ever does go out, then you can have it changed there. You don't have to worry about somebody trying to find you. You already got one. It's in the trunk. And I've done that when I took long road trips. And guess what? I never had to use the one in the trunk. It was still there when I sold the car years later. But it gives you security. You know you got one in there that works, so what the heck. But I wouldn't do it right away because those old ones can last forever. And the rebuilt ones, they're rebuilt. They're broken ones that were fixed. And they're never going to last as long as an original one. That's just the way that it goes. My green one says, my gas pedal is vibrating. I get a vibration from my gas pedal. I don't know what it is. I got the tires bounced and rotated. It's not that. Well, I would have told you it wasn't your tires, because if your tires are out of balance, rims are bent or something, the first thing you're going to get is a shaking steering wheel. Well, the gas pedal's bolted to the body, and then it goes to the engine. The engine's bolted to the transmission. You're getting a vibration from the engine or the transmission. First, check the motor mounts and the transmission mounts. I got a video, how to replace motor mount on your car. Scotty, watch that, and it shows how you can check them by jacking them from the bottom. And if you jack up the engine and transmission from the bottom using a piece of wood and a jack, and you see the motor and transmission pick up and the mounts are ripped open because they're torn. Motor and the transmission are bolted to the mounts. That's bolted to the frame. They sit there. So you're not going to see it when it's sitting, but when you jack it up, if they're broken as you jack it up, you'll see they're ripped open and then it'll come apart. The odds are that's what it is. In a gas pedal, it's connected to the engine. And since the transmission's bolted to the engine, vibration and other will vibrate that. That's what I figure it is. I find that all the time. Check those mounts first, make sure they're not cracked or broken, and also check the drive shafts, because if the drive shafts are worn, that's all connected to it too, and that'll make the gas pedal vibrate. Especially if you have a rear-wheel drive car, because the drive shaft goes from the transmission back, and it's going to vibrate there. In the middle of the vehicle, the pedal will vibrate, but it won't make the wheels shake. Well, if you're wondering, like I am, about the 2021 Ford Bronco, well, now the owner already has wear that went right through the soft top. Worn out. Now, this guy's only had the Bronco for 4 weeks, and the roof's already worn out in a section. It's worn all the way through. On the driver's side, he says it's starting on the passenger side as well, on something that's 4 weeks old. Doesn't surprise me. It turns out that the soft top does not fold properly, and it rubs when it's folded down, and when it rubs, it's rubbed a hole in it. Maybe they should have thought about that when they designed it. I always thought they had engineers to design the tops that, okay, you fold it down, it's not rubbing on anything. No, they probably didn't even think about that. Now, this guy also noticed that the roof folded differently on separate occasions. And it's not just a folded soft top. One guy has a $63,000 Bronco that has the optional molded in color hard top. And it's rattling even when he's hardly moving along. It gets worse as he goes faster. So it's not just a soft top, it's a hard top too. They're having problems with the tops. Obviously, these things were not tested out correctly, or they're just not being built correctly. Either way, it's not a good sign of things to come with the Broncos. So if you never want to miss another one of my new car repair videos, remember to ring that bell.